for joining us on this wonderful Kiach Day. We are celebrating the life of St. Mary, along with all the things that she struggled with. But before we get started, I wanted to introduce you to some of my friends. We're all from the St. Mark Coptic Orthodox Church in DC. My name's Anne Queen.
Hi, I'm Juliana.
Hi, I'm Sophia.
Hi, this is Christina.
Hi, I'm Sonia.
Guys, I'm so excited to be talking with you guys tonight. I love the Kiach season and everything about Christmas. I know we chatted a little bit before about St. Mary's life and all of her faith, but today I think we're going to talk about something that we don't talk about as much, and that's all of the ways that St. Mary struggled and the hardships she faced after Christ was born.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things was St. Mary and St. Joseph and the baby Jesus fleeing the persecution of Herod. Oh, yeah. Herod wanted to kill them, so the angel told them to flee to Egypt.
And imagine how horrible she felt, from the second her baby was born, people were trying to kill him. They wanted to get rid of him, because they were afraid that he was going to be this great king who would overthrow Herod. So from the second he was born, they wanted to kill him.
And as a mother, that must have been very hard for her to feel that someone's trying to kill your baby. That must have been very, very hard for her to deal with.
I think she was enduring a lot of hate.
Yeah.
Even the smallest amount of hate for us, we're like, oh my God, I can't believe you don't like me.
Yeah.
But she's enduring hate from all sides. There is no one that is on their side. And they're just not going from one town to the next. The next town's like, okay, come here, let us protect you. No, every single town rejected them. And some towns, they were begging for food, and the people in the towns were like, no, please go away, because Herod will come after you to, kill your kid.
And we saw what he did to the other children that were left, who were around the same age as the baby Jesus in Bethlehem, which is terrible. So that was probably still fresh in her mind as well.
Yeah, it must be very terrifying for her. She just has a little baby. He's the Son of God. All she knows is she has to take him and run away. She doesn't even know where to go. Everything is pressuring her from every side, yet somehow she still has faith. She's not scared in a sense of her losing her faith. She's just scared, like every other human would be scared. And then she takes the baby, starts running away with him. She doesn't have food. She doesn't have a place that's safe for her, any security. So it does, I think, her faith is what carries her through all of these struggles as she, progresses. And yeah.
It's going to the point of she is facing hardships and difficulties in every sense of the way. Physically, she's literally moving with being hungry on something that's probably uncomfortable while you just gave birth. Emotionally, knowing that so many people don't like you and that, they're out to get you. And then spiritually, it takes a toll on you to continue to do the things you did when you were in relative comfort at the temple. Things were pretty stable, to now having to continue praising God in a time where things aren't stable.
But she was reminded of the importance of her role when the shepherds came and praised her and the baby Jesus, and the wise men came and gave gifts. So she was reminded a little bit of her importance.
And also another thing that I think is important is when they were fleeing, she also had to take care of baby Jesus. She had to feed him and she had to care for him. And they, Christina said, they had nowhere to go. They had no money or any food or any anyone to go to help them. No one wanted to deal with them. So they were on their own, and and Mary didn't know a clear path that God had for her, but she let her faith guide her, and she just completely just gave it all up to God and trusted him.
We said it earlier, she's self-sacrificing. She definitely could have done things differently to make herself feel comfortable, but she didn't. She decided to put Jesus as a baby and really the fate of all nations above her own comfort. So kind of going even further into the life of Christ, after fleeing for so long, when Jesus was a teenager, in the Bible we see him going and preaching. That's another point which must have been really turbulent for St. Mary.
Yeah, I mean, from the story we see that the sheer panic that Mary and Joseph faced when they realized that they had left without him. And he was the most important thing in their life at that point. So when they realized that he was missing, there must have been so many turbulent emotions within Mary and within Joseph when they realized that he had been missing.
Yeah, I know in my life, like when my parents, when I was little and they like lost me in the grocery store, they were overwhelmed with like panic and they're like trying to find me and stuff. So imagine being in like a crowded city and losing your child. Like that must have been very scary for her.
Yeah, and when they were there, it was a crowded place, and they were probably thinking to themselves, like, oh my gosh, we lost the Son of God. What did we do? Like, where is he? So they were probably like really stressed out.
I think when they found him, they were still stressed because, there's a 12-year-old or whatever age he was at in his teenage formative years speaking to some of the most important people of the community. Like, that's not a normal thing. People wouldn't just sit there and listen. Like, that is something that they were definitely hardcore judging Mary and Joseph for raising their child that way. So what do you think we can learn from, this story of Jesus preaching and everyone being there?
I think we can learn that we shouldn't feel that we should conform to society and that we should stand up for what's right, even though we might be judged for it.
Yeah, especially that, back then it was known people from Nazareth, nobody really great comes from there. So he was judged on that basis as well.
Mm-hmm. Plus they were poor. It wasn't like he was coming from a rich family from Nazareth. He was coming from a poor family in Nazareth.
Yeah, and he was seen as just the son of a carpenter, so he wasn't seen as anything special, so people were definitely judging him, people were judging Mary for how Jesus was teaching in the temple. But all of that really changes when Jesus performs his first miracle at the wedding of Cana, where Mary plays a pivotal role in that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that in that story, it's one of the few times in Jesus' adult life where we see Mary. And I think that's what makes that story so important, is that she reappears after quite a few years. I mean, you can imagine he's at least 28 to 30, and the last time we saw him was a teenager. Someone want to tell us a little bit more and recap the story of Cana?
Well, I think the story of Cana really shows Mary's wisdom because first off, like, they ran out of all the good wine, and so she asked Jesus to make more of the wine, and then she told the servants, do whatever he tells you. And so she was like advising Jesus, so she was offering her wisdom to him as like both as like a motherly figure and as someone who guides him. And that also shows that like the Holy Spirit was with her too, because she had that gift within.
And that goes back to what we were saying about the song, Mary, Did You Know? So, in that moment when she was telling those servants, do whatever he says, she knew that something was going to happen. She knew that he was fully capable of replenishing the supply of wine from water.
Right, she had that confidence and she knew that he could do something as amazing as that. So, yeah.
And she wasn't scared of the consequences. Again, people even noted at the wedding saying like, oh, why would you take this wine last? Like, you're supposed to have the best wine for the beginning of the party. But she knew like no matter what he did, he was going to be judged, whether he helped or not. And she wasn't afraid of that difficulty. So I think that's a really good point to break off on, and we'll be right back with our next segment. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us back from the break. We've covered a couple points, including the beginning of St. Mary's life and her hardship, and throughout Jesus' life. I think something that we, can't not talk about is Christ's crucifixion and how much that could have impacted Mary.
Yeah, so Mary had kind of been warned earlier when they had taken Jesus to be circumcised when he was only a few days old. And the prophetess there had foresaw that she would suffer great pains because she would see Christ suffering. So his suffering would then internalize her own suffering. So when Jesus is crucified, it is a form of suffering for her as well.
Yeah, and like imagine being told that from way before that's gonna happen, and every day that's probably what she's thinking about. Okay, like one day I know my son is gonna go through this, he's gonna die, and thinking about that every day.
That makes me so uncomfortable to think about because, like, as someone who worries a lot, I can't imagine not thinking and being worried and being stressed and trying to almost prevent that from happening. I know she knew that that's what had to happen to save, all of our souls, but it's impossible to just not imagine the toll that could have taken.
And not only that, but she also had to witness the events that Jesus went through leading up to his crucifixion. Like, she had to witness him being beaten. She had to witness him having to carry his own cross, and he was like dripping in blood, and everyone was like cursing at him and saying, crucify him, crucify him. So she had to witness all of that, and she didn't say, God, why are you doing this to my son? Why are you doing this? Why are you like even making this happen? Like, if you're really God, why don't you change this? She didn't question God at all. She just believed that he had a plan still.
Yeah, and she probably would have been so bewildered at the change of opinion, how at one point everyone was cheering and welcoming him into the city of Jerusalem, and then at the next moment, like, mocking him and cursing him.
Yeah, I think that would have been terrible for like her son, who she like loves dearly, to see him go through all that pain and suffering, that it took a toll on her. And I think it's amazing how she didn't question God and how she stood firm in her faith and didn't question God at all about what was happening.
And she must have realized that, in a way, Christ wasn't only her son, he was also God's son, and that he belonged to him as well.
Right, but she was human, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a mom, but like my cousin has little kids, and whenever they fall down and get hurt, like, I immediately feel that pain. And I'm like, oh no, like, let me go help you. Oh no, let me, like, you always, even like little kids at church, like, they couldn't even be related to you, and you feel a little bit of that pain. Imagine being a mom, like, you feel every step of the pain. You've watched your kid grow up, like, when he was sick, she took care of him as a baby, she fed him, all that stuff. And now, like, literally watching, your flesh and blood just go through all of that, it's probably horrifying.
Yeah, and not being able to do anything about it, and like not like, I'd honestly feel like she was like, do it to me almost, because like it hurts that much for her. So.
And we see how Jesus reciprocates the love that she had shown him when he instructs John to take care of his mother.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But, I mean, thinking about the fact that she's human and that, she's feeling all those human emotions takes us to the point that she had a lot of hope for what would happen next and a lot of courage that all the things that she sacrificed, would be worth it in the end.
And aside from what you said, she had a lot of determination too, because she was determined to like stay on track. She was determined not to give up on her faith and not to give up on her hope of the plan that God had for her.
Yeah, I think step by step she didn't give up. That's something that we haven't brought up that, is something we can't deny. Christina, do you think that there are other things that we can just take from all of her feelings?
I think that it's something that none of us could be able to handle, not only because it requires a lot of faith and like obedience and trust and hope and a lot of other things. She just had this thing in her that just linked her to God, and she knew that this is how it is. I can get through this.
God blessed her in that way.
Yeah, I think God only gives you as much as you can handle, and this, as difficult and like tremendous it must have been, that was like her, like she could handle it, and so that is amazing.
I mean, God was training her whole life to be able to
Right.
handle that moment.
And also the heartbreak she must have experienced, like having, like watching him, like holding him in her arms when he came down from the cross, and just like remembering like what happened, like how she was just holding him in her arms as a baby, and like her heart must have been like broken by then, like completely shattered, but she still had her strong faith.
Yeah, I think that goes to the song of Mary, Did You Know, of really knowing and believing of why everything was happening the way it was. Not only that he was going to resurrect and come back and save them, but like literally he was the Messiah, the Savior, and like she had to go through that, and he had to go through that.
And she had been with him from the beginning, you know, from his birth to when he starts preaching in the temple to the wedding of Canaan, all the way to the crucifixion. So she really saw what the impact that he had made on other people's lives from his birth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that line from the song Mary, Did You Know? The child that you will deliver will soon deliver the world. And I think that was like maybe like the whole message of like what happened. So.
And we say it a little bit throughout both liturgy and kiach. There are parts of the liturgy that goes into he's come to save us, and that we are praying because we believe in that. You know, right before we take communion, we affirm that faith, that this is the body and blood of Christ. She also probably affirmed her faith before going into that day, knowing, you know, that he was here to save us. So to conclude, I think we should really go through all the points in St. Mary's life where she had different hardships, trials, and tribulations.
So to begin with, she was pregnant and she was hardcore judged by everyone. She was not married, and she felt judged by everyone, and she was physically uncomfortable. She went out to serve her cousin Elizabeth, and that must have been very physically uncomfortable.
Yeah, and then she had to travel with a baby and then give birth. Again, physically very uncomfortable. Through this whole time, she cannot doubt that God is God. And
Yeah, and then building off of that, there was always the fear that Herod would try to kill her son. So they had to flee to Egypt and stay in little caves, probably as uncomfortable as the manger that she gave birth in. So yeah, always being on the move, no stability at all, plagued her in the early years of Christ's life.
Mary, she had her strong faith, and she had her confidence all throughout Jesus' life, even when she saw him on the cross, like when she saw him dying, and she still had her faith and determination, and she knew deep down that God was not gonna like end it like this, and he still had a plan left.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, a good verse that goes right along with that and exactly that point is, the world rejoiced in your salvation, but my heart pains for your crucifixion. I mean, Mary was truly in pain. And I think we've all covered different points in her life and her hardships, but overall we should learn throughout kiach to be praying and praising God for not only giving her that faith, but to give us that faith, so that we can, you know, continue on and to take some of those traits and virtues from Mary and apply it to our lives, and to spend time throughout the month of kiach just dwelling and working on those virtues as we're fasting leading up to Christmas. Thank you guys all so much for joining us today and talking about St. Mary, her hardships, and everything that she went through in her life. Thank you guys for spending some time in kiach with us, and we hope you have a joyous season as we continue to praise both St. Mary and Christ's birth.